Dig those moves. Drop Dead Legs. 1984, their final album with David Lee Roth before the I don't know, the whole new situation of bringing Roth back and then ending with a different kind of truth. But the classic six, that was the top of the hill, top of the mountain. 1984 is among my favorite Van Halen albums for sure. And Drop Dead Legs is probably like one of my top Van Halen songs of all time. And that's my version of it right there. Yeah. So here is the last video in the book series, so to speak here. We've got Alex Van Halen's book that he wrote about his brother, Eddie Van Halen, called Brothers, even though this is backwards, I know. I haven't figured out the whole camera thing yet. I'm just too lazy. Anyways, so yep, Alex Van Halen. And I did get it signed by Alex, which is pretty cool. If you go back in some of my videos, you'll see that I cataloged very amateurly, I don't know if that's even a word, a very amateur version would be even too much credit for how terrible my editing skills are and stuff. But anyways, I've got Alex's signature right there, pretty awesome. And like I said, I got to meet him real quick in New York. And yeah, that's the book that he signed. Awesome. So yeah, last chapter, chapter 15 of his book. I wish the book was longer. I really do. I hope that Alex reconsiders continuing on with the Van Halen story, because it doesn't end with David Lee Roth. There goes my computer doing his computer things right there. So chapter 15, here we go, last one. I've waited a while to make this video because I was enjoying doing this series and I was kind of lamenting that it's coming to an end. But here it is. So it picks up with a Rolling Stone interview in which a lot of credit has been given to Alex Van Halen. It is essentially from a Rolling Stone concert that Van Halen was opening up for the Stones. And I won't go into the details, but Alex had a hand injury, but it didn't matter. He played the show anyways and went into the big lore of what Van Halen is and all that awesomeness that goes along with it. So 15 opens up with that, chapter 15. Oh, by the way, my name's Elton. This is Elton's 15. And chapter 15, whoa, pretty good. So it opens with Ed being I guess, described by Al again as a sensitive soul. Didn't matter if he was drunk. Didn't matter if Ed was sober, happy, sad. The world just got to him in Al's observations. And he categorized it as life took Ed by storm. And he seeded this throughout the entire book. In the last chapter, he's again kind of putting that idea forth again. I guess it wasn't stated enough earlier, and that it was a theme that Al observed about Ed and how he conducted life. So after 1984, this was, as Al says, a depletion of Edward. The putting up with David Lee Roth, the putting up with Ted Templeman in terms of just always trying to cut back his creativity and his ideas. What I mean by cut back is Ed wanting to be way more experimental and Ted just looking for the next hit. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's pretty good. This is my own like aside here, Elton's opinion right here. I think it's great that you can express yourself in all varieties and forms in this sense in music, and that's the freedom is I think a must. But it's always good for someone to kind of reel you in to kind of, hey, let's kind of bring it back a little bit in this direction. I mean, it is their livelihoods, and it was up to Ted to kind of do that so that their albums would sell and that they would have hopefully caught the ear of the public continuously. But anyways, Ed wanted the conflict and all that stuff to disappear. And as Al says, it soon did. So Dave, at this point, is now taking cues from Eddie Van Halen, it seems, that tit for tat. And what's the tit for tat? Well, Ed plays on Michael Jackson's album. He does stuff for Dweezil Zappa, Frank Zappa's son. In the early days, Nicolette Larson. This, as Al thinks, it just paved the way for Dave to essentially just bail. And so the solo EP shows up called Crazy from the Heat. And actually, David Lee Roth wanted to include Eddie Van Halen on the soundtrack. In fact, he wanted Ed to produce the soundtrack for it. And what I mean by soundtracks, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Dave leaves to do a solo EP, and then it was part of a bigger picture. It was like a full thing. So it was a soundtrack and then a movie called Crazy for the Heat. So the EP was called Crazy for the Heat, and then the movie was called Crazy for the Heat. But the movie never got made. I think it was supposed to be, or there was sort of a semi-deal or a deal with CBS to, in fact, finance it, and Dave would do all his zaniness and creativity, and it would be a full-length movie. But from what I can remember from hearing David Lee Roth speak in the past, that a few personalities got shifted or changed over in CBS, and the whole thing just kind of went to just junk, and Roth was involved in trying to sue for stuff, I think. I don't know the exact details, but it fell apart. But anyways, so Dave giving Ed crap for doing solo stuff outside of Van Halen, and Al's like, well, what are you doing? You're doing the same thing, and it's detracting from Van Halen, and this is ultimately what leads to the end of Van Halen. So as Al says to Dave, are you serious in doing this? So Al also categorizes Dave's musical taste away from Van Halen as going to hell. I guess letting David Lee Roth run rampant with his untethered and without any type of like reeling him in, that his musical tastes were all over the map, no real continuity to it. And we could kind of see that if you're familiar with David Lee Roth's solo efforts away from Van Halen in the years that came after 1984. A lot of rock stuff, but also a lot of things that are outside the box, which is pretty cool, pretty neat. I dug a lot of the stuff that he was doing, but then there were some things where you just really, it just didn't get my attention anymore. But anyway, so there goes that. So the screenplay, Crazy from the Heat, he wanted, David Lee Roth wanted Eddie to score it. Dave ultimately thought that Van Halen at this point was holding him back, and that pursuing movie stuff and other stuff was essentially where his efforts were now going to be, I guess, focused in on. Anyways, as Al says, that was the end of the original Van Halen. That was it with David's solo EP, and then chasing after the movie stuff, and then things just went totally downhill. Al thought it was the worst time in the world because, as he says, they were at their peak. They've finally gotten all that they dreamed of. We were finally sounding like us, which I think served as a shadow for Van Halen in that they were always resorting to cover music on not every album, but a healthy dose of David Lee Roth albums for sure. I mean, you pick them off. First album, second album, third album, not so much. Fourth album, not so much. Fifth album, mostly covers. So with Van Halen 1, you've got John Brim's Ice Cream Man. Of course, you have You Really Got Me by the Kinks. The second album, You're No Good. That was a cover tune. Nothing on Women, Children First. Nothing on Fair Warning. Diver Down, like I said, half cover tunes. 1984, none at all. Word was there was a version of In the Midnight Hour. I'm not sure who is the author of that song, but Van Halen had done that in the studio, and I think we're going to include it in 1984, but it never made it. Hopefully it sees the light of day one day, because I've heard it referred to in multiple incarnations over years that song was covered by Van Halen, and then it just never was released. It'd be pretty cool to hear it. Anyways, so they're at their peak. They're finally sounding like themselves, and then suddenly it all just goes to hell, as Al says. Now there's a reading I want to go to from page 219, and the reading is that of a David Lee Roth quotes, and it says, "When I left Van Halen, it was not something that I was delighted to do." Dave said in a dozen years after he quit the band, "I was not celebrating. I was not relieved. It was one of the scariest moments in my life." Hindsight's 2020. At that time, Dave had gotten himself a film deal with CBS, and he was convinced his career as a writer, director, actor was going to make his start in the music business look dull by comparison. Then the film deal fell through, and he never got another one. And so I was kind of just reiterating what I said a few minutes ago, but there's that thought. All right, so Ed, Al, and Mike are devastated by Dave leaving. But you got to think about this. You know, Ed wanted to leave, according to Al in previous chapters, in the early 80s, like 1981. He wanted to say goodbye. Bye, David Lee Roth. He was sick of Dave's antics and his behaviors and all that kind of stuff, but stuck it out. So Al was more like, listen, if you're in this band, you're in it for life. You're part of the blood, and that the only way you're going to leave is in a pine box. That was Al's philosophy about Van Halen, and he mentions that at this juncture in chapter 15, and he goes back to the early first album and says, when Ted was trying to consider, or having Van Halen considered, replace David Lee Roth with Sammy Hagar on the first album, that then no, we came with him, we're leaving with him. It's all for one for all kind of thing. And then again, Al cites, I think it was 1982, sorry, when Ed wanted to leave, and Al was able to kind of redirect Edward. But anyways, Al says once Roth left, it was sadness and upsettingness, but then on the other hand, they were glad that he was gone. But from thereafter, he thought artistically Van Halen was amiss thereafter, that they never had that artistic side of David Lee Roth that really shaped Van Halen in ways in which you can only meld, things together. Certain personalities are like recipes in a soup or a stew. You put them together and you get this, right? But the individual flavors are different. You put them all together, you get this. And so without David Lee Roth, artistically, they were just never the same, according to Al. So Alex Van Halen does not mention Sammy Hagar by name. He just says, we had more success later on, and we got ourselves a real manager, and he's talking about Ed Loeffler. He mentions Ed Loeffler, who Sammy Hagar brought into the band with him. That was Sammy's manager, but doesn't mention Sammy Hagar. I mean, the acrimony at this point is just, it's I'm speechless. I was hoping, and I'm giving a lot of opinions in this last chapter here, it seems. But at this juncture, everybody's in their 70s. The stuff that happened in the past, it's just time to let it go. It was okay, Al, for you to mention Sammy in your book. I mean, you really needed to. The fact that you're not, obviously, is a passive-aggressive way of kind of dealing with the situation. I did not enjoy when I'm reading it. Whether you're a Sammy fan or not, the guy helped propel Van Halen into the next decade of music, or the next 10 years of music thereafter David Lee Roth. I don't think anyone else is going to be able to do that. You look around at the available singers at that time and who Van Halen was considering as possible replacements for David Lee Roth. Sam did it. I mean, and you just have the respect on that level for him. But anyways, he didn't, and so it's not mentioned. And so there's another reading on page 220 to 221 that we had a lot of singers. So let's see here. We had a lot of other singers over the years. Well, what's a lot? I mean, Sammy Hagar, yes, and then Gary Cherone. That's not a lot. That's just two more. And also, there's that Mitch Malloy guy who supposedly got the gig before Gary, but chickened out once he saw that a reunion with Roth was pretty inevitable, I think. He didn't record with them outside maybe a song or two. Never really fully released. I think Mitch released one song. Anyways, okay, 3 at the most, but really 1 consequently. Gary Cherone, that one album is more like a Eddie Van Halen soul album, if we're really serious about it. I don't think Al even plays drums on the album, if you really listen to the guy that produced it, Mike Post. I think Al was going through some tough times, and Ed ended up playing the drums on it for the most part. I don't know if it's every song, but the drums do sound a little bit different. There's definitely a different feel to it. And I think Ed played most of the bass, if not all the bass. But anyway, so yeah. We had a lot of other singers over the years. We had more success later on when we finally got the manager we deserved in Ed Loeffler. Yeah, another guy I miss. He couldn't have been better to us, or better at his job, or a better guy, period. See you on the other side, Loeffler. But creativity is an argument among friends, and we never fought better with anyone than we did with Dave. It was like we all put our ideas together in a dogfight, and whichever one got out alive made it on stage. It was that conflict that gnawed away at all of us constantly. Out of it came earth-shaking, cultural-changing music. And that's a quote from actually David Lee Roth. And Al says he's right, undeniably. And he also says thereafter that when Eddie Van Halen passed on, Al called David Lee Roth. Yeah, he was the first guy he called. That says a lot, doesn't it? I think so. So Dave gets the call, and Al but he substantiates with saying just out of a mutual respect. And he says that Roth leaving the band was the most devastating thing to Al's life. And then when Ed died, that was the most devastating thing. But he says the two things are not equal. It's just for his point, or that time in life, nothing equaled that when Roth left. And when Ed left the earth, passed on, nothing is equal that. And there's a big chasm between the two. So, Dave bailing, unfair, anger, bafflement, grief, again, the most devastating point in Al's life, and then Ed's passing, again, he compares it as David Lee Roth was a paper cut versus your head getting chopped off by Ed dying. So there's the summation of all that. Anyways, the band moved on, and now the concluding parts of chapter 15 are that it's been 4 years since Ed's passing, and that Al said he's never gotten over Ed's death, that he finds himself thinking back on the beginning a lot, like the real beginning, like moving here to the United States, from living in Holland to then the boat ride to, the piano, being on the boat, to the little girl that he remembers on the boat ride, to Pasadena, to all of it. And then it does conclude with him mentioning that their last show as the original four, Eddie Van Halen or Edward Van Halen on guitar, Michael Anthony on bass, Alex Van Halen on drums, and David Lee Roth on vocals, was in Nuremberg, Germany. And that's it. Now, the last couple of pages of the book, Al's wife, Stein, has a paragraph in there, and I'm not going to read that. It's in the coda, and then from there, it's like a direct letter from Al to Ed. And before the book was released, Al had put on an audio version of that letter to Ed, and that's the first thing I'd heard anything out of the book was through that. But it's a great book if you're a Van Halen fan, even if you're not a Van Halen, but a rock music fan in general. I highly recommend it. I mean, I took the time to go through the chapters with you guys to try to outline what I thought was interesting points all along. I hope you've enjoyed this. So this is Elton's 15, and now I'm gonna kind of shift away from the book stuff because it's over. So I think I'll be just focusing on just music news in general. It'll probably be heavy with Van Halen at the time because that's my band. I've been a huge Van Halen fan, as I've mentioned before, since probably fourth grade, and now I'm a million years old here. But yeah, they continually just. I don't think I've gone since fourth grade very long without listening to Van Halen music in some form or fashion. But anyways, in closing, if you've watched any of the videos, or maybe this is the first one you're watching, check out the other ones. They may be worth your time. Or maybe you've watched it and I've wasted all that time listening to this guy. Hopefully you see it in the positive. But yeah, I'm hopeful that Al hopefully considers continuing the Van Halen story with Sammy Hagar, and then where the ultimate end was, where Ed passes on, because there's a lot of history in there that we just don't know about, and it'd be great for him to share his insight. There's a lot of stuff in here that I didn't know, but I would say that being such a rabid Van Halen fan, I probably knew a good chunk of what was in here, and it was great coming across those nuggets like, whoa, that was awesome, because I certainly didn't know about it and wouldn't have never known about it unless Al had taken the time to put this together. So Al, write part 2 for crying out loud, or part 2 and then maybe a part 3. That'd be great, or however you want to divvy it up. I would love it, and I think there's a few other people that would too. Anyways, thank you again for tuning in. My name's Elton. This is Elton's 15. Thank you.